Owning a home is full of surprises. Some wonderful, some not so much. And when something breaks, it can feel like the whole day unravels. That's why HomeServe exists. For as little as $4.99 a month, you'll always have someone to call. A trusted professional ready to help, bringing peace of mind to 4.5 million homeowners nationwide. For plans starting at just $4.99 a month, go to homeserve.com. That's homeserve.com. Not available everywhere. Most plans range between $4.99 to $11.99 a month your first year. Terms apply on covered repairs.
This is Peter.
And this is Tom.
And you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcast.
Now part of the Evergreen Podcast Network.
All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Reska, and welcome back to our podcast. Tom, a big figure today.
Yeah, big figure in history, one that, again, there's probably so much stuff out there. There is so much stuff out there on when just doing the research for this. I'm sure there's podcasts just on this individual, super deep dives, which is not what we do here, right? We're not doing a super deep dive. This is going to be kind of just like a brief little, overview just to give you information
accessible history.
But definitely someone who influenced. If you look at it, we'll talk about it obviously in the podcast, but just influenced so much when it comes to Western culture. We're talking about Julius Caesar, right? He transformed Rome from a republic to an empire. He was very ambitious, led to a lot of political reforms, right? He was famous not just for what he did militarily and politically, but also probably, he's that one of history's steamiest love affairs with Cleopatra, and just has a lot of
cool quotes,
influence, a lot of quotes. Some of them, whether or not he said them or not, that's one of those things.
Yeah.
But just a lot of influence today. So much like Shakespeare writes a play about the guy, which a lot of people take as like biographical, but there's a lot of stuff there.
Brief overview, and then we'll get to some fun facts, because there's a decent amount of fun facts here that we could talk about with regards to it. So, Julius Caesar. But one thing I looked into, first of all, when I started doing the research for Julius Caesar, was how the heck do we know so much about Julius Caesar? Like, that was my first thing I looked into.
Right?
So once you start researching it, you realize that we actually know so much about him because he wrote about himself.
Like the victors write history, and that's pretty much what happened with him. So he won everything, so he's writing about himself, and he's recording himself, particularly his battles with the Gauls, right? That's probably what he writes a lot about, which is
writings.
Probably one of his greatest achievements also. And he writes all about it, so you have all that recorded history there. It's it's a primary source with a little bit of a spin, of course, on it.
Of course, yeah, right. He wrote his own history, kind of like Churchill would say. History will be kind to me, for I shall write it. That's basically the premise here with Caesar.
That's not the premise. That's exactly what he did.
And so Caesar, when you look at his writings, besides the fact that he wrote about himself, Cicero was also a very known, who lived at the same time as Julius Caesar, also a very known philosopher that wrote, as well as Caesar, in Latin. So the Christian religion has preserve their writings, believe it or not, when I was looking into it over the years and centuries, because they said Julius Caesar and Cicero's writings were the best pure examples of the Latin language as it was written. So they started using these writings kind of as a guide on, preserving the Latin language itself, which is why they became so popular. Yeah, these stories became so popular because even the Christian world adopted them as like, all right, well, if we want a reference on how to write something in Latin, let's go back to Caesar and Cicero's writing.
Yes, and it became a source book, basically.
Exactly. All right, so Julius Caesar, was a very known general, politician, scholar in ancient Rome. Everyone pretty much knows that. He conquers a region of Gaul, helps initiate the end of Roman Republic, all that good stuff. Is born, this is the start thing. Again, it's just so weird that we could read his own writing, and this dude was born 100 BC.
Yeah, 100 BC, July 13th, 100 BC. And his father had the exact same name as him. Julius Caesar. And his mother, Aurelia Cotta.
Yep.
She winds up, her family was a little bit more influential than the father's family, from what I was reading too.
Yep, same here.
But there's this rumor with Caesar. I'm not going to give away the fun facts now. The rumor with Caesar that he was born by cesarean, and that's not true.
Not true.
He was not born by cesarean. His mother lived, deep into his life. I think she lives into her 50s or something like that. They believe that the Caesar name probably could have come from someone in his background, in his bloodline, could have been born by cesarean, which did exist at the time, but it was only done in
complete emergency. Yeah,
complete emergency because the mother was not surviving it. You ever watch that Walking Dead episode, right, when they have to do the cesarean? Right, the mother's not surviving that procedure. It's only done if the mother's already dead or if she's dying just to save the child. But Caesar's mom did live, and supposedly Caesar could trace his bloodline all the way back to Venus, right? So he was a descendant of the goddess Venus, and that's what he would basically argue. And his name could mean several things, right? It could mean Caesarean. It could mean something about flowing hair, right?
I saw that too. I wasn't sure.
It also meant that one of it, and it meant killer of elephants.
You saw that, right? I saw that too. It was like
Yeah,
this idea of like that perhaps someone in his bloodline somewhere down the line had
killed an
killed an
elephant.
elephant,
And they
and
said that's what
therefore,
Caesar always talked about. You see a lot of pictures of him, I guess, or like imagery of him with elephants. They said
well, he
sources
was
said.
obsessed with Alexander the Great.
We'll get
Yeah,
to that. Yeah,
to
yeah.
ride those.
Yeah,
Um,
Caesar knew history, without a doubt.
Yeah, no, I mean, the guy's a writer. His father dies very quickly in 85 BC. Caesar becomes head of the family. He's like 15, 16 years old. He's fairly young. And what's happening is while he comes of age and becomes the head of this family, Rome, as we know, is in the midst of a civil war between his uncle, Marius, and the Roman ruler, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, right?
So, and that's something you see a lot with this. We're doing research, right, Pete? Is that Rome's
Yep.
at civil war a lot. Like
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
lot of these civil wars in Rome. Like they're just fighting constantly with somebody and then with each other. That's just what happened. Everyone's vying for power. That's just something to keep in mind if you're ever reading history about this point. Is they are always fighting.
Interesting thing here too is he did not come from the most wealthy household. He did learn how to read and write in Latin at a young age. He did study Roman law, history, and he learned to be a public speaker.
But he was
He did
good
all
at it too.
this. Yeah, he was pretty decent at that. And he did all this when he was like a teenager. So around the time when his father passes away, Julius is made responsible for providing for his mother and his sister Julia, right? Julia, right? So
Yeah.
he's thinking about joining the priesthood to support his family. But essentially he's like, well, that's not really going to get me the money I want. So he's in love with one woman, but a woman that he is technically in love with is of like a below standing. So he starts looking for a wife that is a certain level. And I think it was patrician. Is that the word I'm looking for? A patrician of Rome comes from a Latin word patres, meaning fathers. And these families provided for like the empire's political, religious,
Yeah, he's like the
military
big
leadership.
shots. These are the wealthy elites
Wealthy
for the most part.
landowners. Yeah,
Yeah.
wealthy elites. So he basically finds a wife among one of these wealthy elites.
Cornelia. Good.
Is she his cousin? Because
She's a daughter of Marius. Yes, I guess they're probably somewhat related, maybe somewhere down the line, but I don't think blood from what I heard. But she's a daughter of Marius, right? His
yeah,
ally. And they do have one child together who, Julia,
also
who,
Julia.
who was also Julia. Yeah. Yeah, but they were called like Julia Major and Julia Minor. That's how they were like distinguished against. But what basically is Sulla wins the civil war
Yeah.
and basically he kills, Marius. And then he orders Caesar to divorce her, Cornelia. And Caesar refuses to. And he actually goes into hiding.
Caesar is banished more or less by Sulla. His father-in-law was just killed by Sulla, so Marius is done, and
done.
therefore all of the money that was going to go to Caesar from Marius through his daughter and Caesar's
Gone.
wife is gone. So Sulla strips Caesar of all of his inheritance. The guy's
he lets
got
him come
nothing.
back. He lets him come back. They say, they say Caesar can come back but he has no inheritance.
Yep.
So he's allowed to come back, but that's it. So he say, I'm not going to kill you, but you're starting from scratch. You're not getting any of your inheritance. And that's when he basically
He runs away, right?
He joins the army for a number of years. And he's actually doing pretty good there. He's fighting. He was awarded the civic crown, which is kind of like not a medal of honor, but it's something of that level.
Well, this is where he gives him a name for himself.
You're going to hear about his bravery, his battle tactics, and he pretty much stays in the army until Sulla dies, right? Because he still doesn't really trust coming back totally.
Yep. So while he's out there, Caesar is awarded many medals for saving lives in battle, right? He's promoted and promoted and promoted through ranks as he's going through. It seems like he found his niche in the military. Essentially, when he comes back to Rome after the death of Sulla in 70, what is it? I think it's
78 BC.
78 BC, right? When he comes back, he's got a military status. So because he's also a good speaker and he's educated, he then enters politics and he decides like, all right, well, I have some basis. I have some credibility through my military exploits. So he starts to rise through political ranks fairly quickly.
He does become a prosecutor. And that's really what he becomes kind of known for. That's how he gets into politics. Because he goes after what he calls corrupt government officials. Yep. So he's doing that. And then, so he's slowly earning his way. And he gets elected. What he does do is Cornelia died in 67 BC. So all this all marriage. She winds up marrying Pompeia, which is the granddaughter of Sulla. And
he does that to consolidate the enemies.
Yeah, and it's a relative of Pompey the Great, which is another big-time military leader, and they form that alliance. So it's all like construed. It's all these marriages are very political. Like, I'm going to marry your daughter, I'm going to marry your granddaughter, you're going to marry my daughter, and now we're all going to be one family. And since we're family, we're going to work together. And it's kind of like a Games of Thrones, House of Dragons, all that crazy stuff. This is all real life. Minus the dragons and stuff like that.
I mean, I guess that's where these people get their ideas from, right? I would think.
Well, yeah. Well, it's all medieval history. Well, medieval Roman history, stuff like that. It's all this. Wait till we get to the whole thing with Egypt. Like, it's even crazier there.
Right. So anyway, he makes powerful friends, pursues these positions. Friends is one of them is Pompey, who's his wife is related to Pompey the Great, and another wealthy person named Marcus Crassus. Right.
Yeah.
During this time, the three of them kind of more or less become like the rulers, I would say,
Yeah,
of.
yeah. The Senate is worried about this because Gracchus is the richest man in all of Rome. So he's
Yep.
super rich. He helped Caesar get elected as the senior Roman consul in
Yep.
59 BC, and they formed this informal alliance. But if you look in history, it's known as the First Triumvirate. And the Senate is not like that. But like, this is it was terrifying them because they knew that this partnership would be too powerful. These three powerful men together, and then they were proved right. Triumvirate soon pretty much controlled Rome.
Yeah, no, they made all the decisions. During this time, also Julius, by the Senate, is appointed the governor of Spain. So it's almost like a way of like trying to like get him out of Rome.
Out of Rome, yeah.
Yeah, so he goes to Spain. He commands 4 Roman legions in Spain, and he's extremely successful, defeating all the Spanish rebellions. And it's actually here that while he's in Spain, right, that he comes across the bust of Alexander the Great.
Great, yeah.
Alexander the Great, during the time of his exploits, was like 30 years old, and he had already conquered, most of the world. From
Just
that
listen to our
point.
podcast on him, and you'll know about it.
But here's Julius Caesar, and he's like, crap, like I'm almost 30. Like I haven't accomplished as much as he has. And it almost became an obsession with him that like Alexander the Great had accomplished by his age so much and conquered so much that Julius Caesar all of a sudden felt like it wasn't enough to just having that military prestige.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he was having some success in Rome politically, but it's not enough.
He had a ton of ambition, and seeing that other people outperformed him at that age, like Alexander, other people, he got jealous. I guess you'd call it type of jealousy, but also it drove him. It drove him to do more. He wanted to prove himself.
But how do you compare yourself to Alexander the Great at 30? Dude, at 30, I was like playing PlayStation. Like I guess it's good to not compare yourself, but strive to be like someone successful at your age. But
yeah, you want to strive for greatness. And who's greater at that point than the guy's name is Alexander the Great. So if you're gonna strive to be like somebody, it's not a bad role model.
He returns to Rome in about 60 BCE. He runs for consul, right, and wins. And consul was the highest position in Roman Republic government. So think of it like in a Roman Republic, there was 2 consuls elected each year to serve 1-year terms. So it's like you're like the president, think of it this way, right? It's only 1-year term, but again, there's 2 consuls, they're like the bosses. Now, during this time, his relationship with Pompey the Great and Crassus, again, these 2 wealthy Romans, flourishes even more. And the reason for it is because Julius basically gives Pompey his daughter Julia. He's like, all right, marry my daughter Julia, and this will further like our family ties.
Yeah, he's Pompey's father-in-law, right? So it's gonna connect them.
Yeah, the 3 of them basically, like off the books, the 3 of them pretty much rule Rome.
The first triumvirate.
Okay, so this is also what brings Julius Caesar, because this is an agreement. Like, all right, who's going to like kind of rule what? And Julius Caesar becomes the governor of Gaul.
Yeah, which is North Central Europe in 58 BC. And doing that, he also gets command of a large army. Like we can do a podcast just on the Gallic Wars. Like they're extensive. I mean, just research. I was like, man, this is a lot of stuff, but a lot of names that just get more and more difficult to pronounce, right? But
You remember the comic book Asterix?
No.
De Gaulle? You don't remember Asterix de Gaulle? It's like huge in Europe. It's about Asterix and Obelix. And
you got to remember again, Pete, I was not born in Europe.
I know. You watch the American cartoons. These are like French Belgian cartoons. They're so good, Asterix.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, they were the Gauls and they fought Caesar.
I was not reading French comic books when I was 5 or 6. Sorry to disappoint.
Yeah.
This wasn't what was going on. Anyway, so
the Gauls, by the way, FYI, guys, these are like Germanic tribes.
Yeah, Germanic tribes. Yeah. Fierce warriors. And there's so much interesting stuff with them. But Caesar, conducted a bunch of these campaigns and conquers the region, basically, right? Did a lot of things that Alexander the Great would do later on when he becomes dictator of Rome. Like all the lands that he conquers in Gaul, he says, after I conquer, you're going to become citizens of Rome. So he's getting and through these campaigns, when the news gets home to Rome, he's getting very popular. That's one thing that we can't underscore enough of this is Caesar was incredibly popular with the people of Rome. The senators not always liked him, other leaders didn't always like him, but the people of Rome as a whole pretty much loved the guy. And that's just something to really just keep in mind. Caesar does a lot of stuff here. He crosses the Rhine River into Germanic territories, right? He even crosses the English Channel to Britain. And that's actually the first recorded British history. Recorded history really starts with when Caesar shows up. He never conquers Britain, but he does go there a couple of times.
Like he invades, he never stays, and
Yeah,
he only
never
moves off the
stays.
beach a little bit. But the
Yeah.
fact that he's able to like go there in
Yeah,
itself was like
crossing
a
the
big deal.
Channel, go to Britain, right? But he talks about the people of Britannia and stuff, and that's the beginning of like British, like I said, British history, really
Yeah,
recorded history.
55 BC, before Common Era. When you teach, do you say like BC or BCE? Like,
Well, BCE and BC, it's just they change it from before Christ to before Common Era, but it's the years match up the same. So
yeah, no, I know.
but you
It's just
see,
like it's
I know it's
interesting because
supposed to be in the other one. C. You don't really see Common Era as much anymore. A lot of times you still see BC and AD. Most
yeah,
of the
that's what I was
research I did on
surprised.
this was
Yeah,
still BC and AD. I think that kind of was a movement. I remember when we were in college, but I
yeah,
don't think it really caught. I don't think it really caught on. It's like the
yeah. I
metric
remember being
system in
told
the
like
U.S.
you should say before Common Era, not before
Yeah,
Christ. Like I remember being taught that in school when we were learning to be teachers.
yeah.
That and do not use a red pen because it upsets students. You should use a green pen because it is light.
I use a red marker.
Well, now this day and age, everything's online, so it doesn't matter. But I do you remember
Yeah,
that
but
they taught us.
but use red font.
Oh, dude, that takes like dedication. You got to click buttons. But I remember being told to use green. Use green pens. It's lighter on the eyes for the students, and it doesn't stress them out.
Life is stressful. They'll be okay.
Life is stressful. Anyway, so while he's doing his thing, it feels like they're always pushing him out of Rome, though. It's like they know he's too ambitious, so they're like, go out and do stuff. Meanwhile, he's like conquering in the name of Rome
It's
all of
conquering
Europe.
everything. Yeah.
But during his absence, the political situation becomes quite bad. There's another civil war, as you mentioned before. It breaks out. Crassus is killed in 54 BC in a battle.
Crassus and Pompey don't like each other. Yeah,
Yes.
they never liked each other. And Caesar kind of kept them at bay, but with him not being there, yeah, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and so with Crassus dead, another thing that kind of messes up this whole like thing they had going is that same year in 54 BCE, Julia, Caesar's daughter, dies in childbirth.
Childbirth.
So now, right, like
doesn't have that
Pompey's kind of
connection with Pompey
PO'd.
anymore,
Yeah, Pompey's kind of PO'd. So he winds up taking full control of Rome. He becomes the sole military leader of Rome. Pompey does.
He orders Caesar home, right? He
Yes.
orders him home. Caesar's getting too popular, so he orders Caesar and his army to return home. And Caesar's
Disband the Roman
basically
legions first. He said, I need you to disband your Roman legions. So, like, I don't want you returning home with the army. I just want you returning
disband
home.
them and come home. And Caesar's basically like, no, thank you.
Yeah. Instead, he takes the legions and continues like his conquest. He crosses the Rubicon River. He basically marches on Rome 5 years later in 49 BC. But by then, Caesar's army was so huge and his popularity has preceded him so much that Pompey actually flees. Like he runs to Spain.
Yeah, well, it triggers a civil war, right? And then between Pompey and his supporters and Caesar and Caesar's armies, they pursued him from Spain, Greece, and finally in Egypt, where he meets
18 months.
Cleopatra.
For 18 months, he was chasing Pompey and his armies through Spain into Egypt. Yep.
But what I kept on reading about this is he really respected Pompey, right? Like he didn't necessarily want to kill Pompey; he just needed to catch him. But he really
you want to
Pompey.
solidify your power because remember Pompey declared himself the sole ruler of Rome. So like you almost need to have him conquered so you could.
Well, he needs him, but he doesn't want to kill him, and he's actually angry that because what happens is
Ptolemy, right?
Ptolemy, basically is worried about Rome invading Egypt, so Pompey is staying there and he kills him. Yeah, so when Caesar shows up, he gives Caesar Pompey's severed head. And apparently Caesar's like distraught about this. I read this a couple of places. He was distraught. He's angry about it. And he wants to know who actually killed Pompey. Then he has those people killed.
This is where he forms the alliance with Cleopatra.
Cleopatra and Ptolemy, they were brother and sister.
Yep.
But they were also rulers. They were married. That's like the Egyptian ancient Egypt way. So and there was always a ruler of the two kings, like ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, I guess, right?
Because he's basically like, wait, hold on.
He's like, I didn't ask you to do this. You don't have the authority to kill a Roman, more or less.
And at that point, with Cleopatra, the Roman legions battled the Egyptian army for about 6 months or so. And after the 6 months, Julius Caesar and Cleopatra officially defeat the Egyptian army in the spring of 47 BCE. And at that point, he leaves Cleopatra as the sole queen and ruler of Egypt. Like, he basically got there to chase a guy. The leader of Egypt killed the guy for him, which pissed off Julius Caesar.
Yeah,
so then he fought a war against this guy and then sets Cleopatra as the new leader. And then he's like, all right, peace out, I'm leaving. And then he goes through Asia Minor, just like defeating enemies left and right. You know, any enemy that allied themselves with Pompey, he found them and killed them.
Yeah, he had to make sure there was no remnants of Pompey's. But he does stay in Egypt for a little bit, right? Doesn't he? Or does he go back? I don't know. But I know he
Oh, he
winds up
stays for a
having.
little bit, but I think, I mean, do you want to do this now, or you want to talk about it, like fun
No, we
facts?
do. It fits in with it now. It fits in
All
with
right,
it now.
go.
They never married, but they do have a long-term love affair. Where they supposedly did produce a son, which I guess
I
is kind of considered historical fact now. They did
I
have a
did,
son.
yeah, he did have his son, who was
Yeah,
killed later. But yeah.
yeah, but yeah.
So, well, yeah, sad. She gives birth to a son named Caesarion, I guess.
So
Caesarion,
Sarah,
like
known
Yeah.
as Little Caesar,
Yep.
becomes also Ptolemy the 15th
Yep.
later on when
Ptolemy.
he takes the throne. Because Cleopatra, the whole thing is she wants him to be the next ruler of Egypt. But I remember it was always like debate if it was Caesar's son, but now they're basically saying no, it's Caesar's son.
Yeah, but you know how there was unrest in Egypt, right? And Cleopatra and Caesarion actually flee to Rome for protection.
Yeah, they're there.
And
Yeah,
and Caesar erects a golden statue of the queen and never really denies the fact that Caesarion is his son, but at the same time, he actually was married. So it was kind of like an
yeah.
awkward thing because he
Yeah,
was married. Things weren't looking good for him. The fact that he had a foreign lover that wasn't Roman, that was one thing. And the fact that he was married. So Cleopatra and her son are kind of like not forced, but like suggested they go back to Egypt, which they wind up doing shortly after Caesar's assassination, the infamous
yeah.
assassination.
We're getting a
Uh,
little ahead of ourselves. So
yeah, but
right.
eventually what does happen with Caesarion, he is killed by Caesar's great nephew and heir,
Yeah,
Octavian,
Octavian. Yeah,
because he doesn't want anybody trying to claim the throne, basically, or try to
yeah,
claim Caesar's, right to power. Let's go back to Caesar's life for a second. All right,
yeah.
so
So he comes back. So we're in 46 BC now,
yep,
right?
he comes
So he
back.
comes back to Rome, and he's made dictator for 10 years. So
Yep.
remember, a lot of people get confused that Caesar was a Roman emperor. He was never a Roman emperor. He was dictator several times. So before that, Rome did have dictators before this, but it was only in times of war.
hmm
Yeah, he's made dictator for 10 years, and his political opponents are not happy about this.
Well, doesn't
And
he?
they're
Because he proclaims himself dictator for life. Well, meanwhile, they only give him that power for 10 years.
for 10 years, yeah, but he's saying it's for life, and they know if he's going to be able to do what he wants
Yeah.
because he's got the people backing him. Whether he liked the people or whether he realized, he's here to help the people, or knowing if he had the people's backing, since it's supposed to be a republic, you have the people's backing, you have the power, right? But he makes several things that actually make life better for lower middle class Romans.
Yep.
Like he regulates distribution of grain, so he's giving grain to people so they have food,
Poor people.
right?
Yeah.
He's increasing the size of the Senate so more people get into it. He's reducing the government debt. Something that is a great idea for him at the time is he's giving land to military veterans. So he's taking land away from like these wealthy elites, and you don't need any more. I'm giving it to these war veterans, so they're going to support him no matter what, right? We talked about before that when he's granting Roman citizenship to people in all these territories, one of the biggest things is he adopts the Julian calendar at the time, which
Yep.
changes it from 350 days, 55 days to 364 and a quarter days. So he
Yeah.
creates the leap year, Julius Caesar.
Yeah, and it's also like looking at this, that was kind of one of the big things of contention here is that he was so good to the poor people.
Yeah.
It was this idea of
And
like,
people love him so much. Yeah.
yeah, and the fact that like when he's allowing senators to get in and lowering those standards, it's almost like he's creating more of a democracy, but that's not a good thing in Rome. Like the wealthy families don't want to dilute that
Yeah.
power.
I mean, also he's becoming more powerful,
Yes.
and then the senators. When I say they, I mean the senators are just getting more and more. So he's going to become a tyrant, and that's what they're going to try to say. But they're also like he's getting more powerful than us, and
Yeah.
they don't want that. That they think have. So it's actually in 44 BC is where he declares himself dictator for life.
Yep.
That's where he says this, and that's also going to spell his
Yeah, a couple
end,
months later, yeah, he
because
gets
that doesn't go over well with his opponents, with the politicians.
okay.
They're afraid he's going to become a king.
Let's talk about his death a little bit and kind of finish that up before we get.
This is
to
probably
some
some of the most famous things with him, right?
Yeah.
So it happens on the Ides of March 15th, 44 BC, and it's led by several senators, right? Particularly Gaius, Cassius, Longus. Well, Brutus, you know what I found out about this? I never knew this. So I always be over here is it tu Brute, which is something, you tu Brutus, which is more of what Caesar said. But I always know Brutus was his friend. Actually, there's a lot of evidence now that states that Brutus was probably the illegitimate son of Caesar, and Caesar knew he was probably his son, and that he might have said, "And you too, my son,"
Yes, yeah, I did see that.
which is crazy. Imagine your son stabbing you.
I mean,
My
hopefully
one,
not.
I could see it. My one, I could see it.
Yeah, me too. Isn't that funny how that works? Like my one, maybe. Well, my other one, no.
For fun, just for fun. My
Oh
4-year-old
my-
would probably do it for fun.
Yeah, no, we're
What was I?
terrible. But I
We'll see.
agree, mine too. So anyway, there's paintings, the
Oh,
death of
shown
Caesar.
paintings, plays, movies. I remember watching one in like history class in like 8th grade. Yeah, that shows Caesar being stabbed to death right there on the Senate floor, which is really crazy when you think about it. But if
Yeah.
you watch like videos from around the world, there's some crazy stuff that happens in the Senate at times. Like look in the even the
Oh,
American Senate, right?
yeah,
There's
Civil War in the
yeah,
Senate
Civil
before
War.
before the Civil War happened, they had to bring in dogs
Yeah.
and hold the dogs in the front in case any senator got out of hand when between North and South. They would threaten to unleash the dogs. Like how
Even now,
crazy
the
is that?
Senate's kind of getting. You watch some of those Senate hearings now; it gets kind of interesting at times. But that's a
Oh
whole
yeah, to
other,
say the least.
whole other thing.
As we know for a fact, he walks into the Senate. He is backstabbed by these two people first, and eventually they said about 60 people participate in the
Participate,
assassination.
yeah, whatever. So he's stabbed 23
23
times.
times. Yep.
He's 55 at the time, and pretty much what this does is it marks a downfall of the Roman Republic. So the
Yeah.
senators just say, so we're doing this to save the Roman Republic. That's what their argument is. When actually, by doing this, they bring up the downfall of it,
Yeah, they
right?
bring
Because
another civil war. Yeah.
they bring another civil war. Mark Antony really gets them riled up, right? Because Mark Antony's actually like a high priest, so he's a good friend of Caesar, and he gets people riled up. But this is what's going to eventually give the rise of Caesar's grandnephew Octavian. Later becomes known as Augustus Caesar, and he becomes the first emperor of Rome.
And that's the funny part, right? I mean, ironic, not funny. Like they thought Caesar was becoming too powerful than
Too
the Senate.
powerful, so
So
we
let's
have to
kill
kill
him
him.
and the Senate will have power. Nah, that's not going to work.
But they basically made him a martyr. Say that leads to another civil war, right? That's when
Yep.
Cleopatra and the son flee back. They're like, oh, we can't stay here, right? They go back to Egypt. They eventually meet Mark Antony, right? So Mark Antony and his forces, because he's competing for power against Octavian. They're saying,
Yep.
okay, who's going to? That's really what the civil war is. There's other factions, but pretty quickly it becomes Octavian versus Mark Antony.
Oh, we should also say Mark Antony is one of Caesar's biggest generals.
Biggest
Right?
general, supporters, a high priest,
Yeah.
right? Because Caesar is almost seen as like a deity at this point, right?
Yeah.
He's like divine. And Mark Antony then, because he likes Caesar so much, he also has an affair with Cleopatra, right?
Yep.
That's a whole other thing. Until they're eventually surrounded by Octavian forces and they commit suicide, right? They poison themselves. And
Yep.
then Octavian comes in and he kills the son. And then he now becomes emperor of Rome.
Crazy, isn't it?
Oh, well, I mean, it's a crazy story. I mean, that's why Shakespeare wrote a story on it. It's an interesting story. There's a whole bunch of craziness. There's a lot of stuff with like bloodlines and things like that. And Caesar's just one of these people. He has a huge impact. I mean, all the calendar we have. Look at this time period too. We have October's named after Octavian, right?
Yeah.
August for Augustus, July for Julius. So even our months that are used come from people from this time period.
Let's talk about some like little known facts about Julius Caesar. I mean, because
We
that's
talked about
pretty
a
much
few,
his life.
yeah. Yeah.
We did kind of allude to a few of them there. Caesar's name, which no one really knows. There's some potential elephants involved. We did talk about his love affair and son with Cleopatra. You did allude to the fact that he created the Julian
year.
calendar. He's
Yeah.
the guy that basically said the ordinary year is made up of 365 days. However, it's 365 days 0.24.
Right, it's following a solar calendar where the old one used to follow a lunar calendar.
Yep.
But it never matched up properly with the season sometimes. That's why people didn't like it.
But the world did use Julius Caesar's calendar until 1582.
Yeah, and the one they adopted after that is very similar, right?
Very similar.
I forgot what it was called.
It makes the leap years occur every 4 years, except in a year's divisible by 100, but not 400. And that supposedly like makes the accuracy over the years a little bit better. Caesar was also the first Roman to make a coin in his image.
Yeah, interesting.
Interesting, considering he was still alive. I mean, but it also adopts the idea of going forward of like coinage having rulers and leaders on them. Unless you're in Canada, then there's like hockey.
Then it's hockey. Yeah, we talked about purple hockey.
Yeah.
But when he dies, like it should show like how much he picture people too. He wills all of his land, his gardens, his artwork, and his money to the people of Rome. Every Roman citizen got some of his personal wealth after he died in his will.
That's almost like when we talked about on our podcast about Ben Franklin.
I remember.
Like left money to Philadelphia and the people of Philadelphia and the merchants of Philadelphia. It's almost like, again, you learn from history, right? You kind of could see where that came from. Okay, what else we have?
You can actually visit the spot today where he was killed, and you can actually go in the spot where he was cremated too. Like it's still there.
Did you see something like there's like a cat sanctuary at the same spot where like he was killed now?
You think, which is over 2,000 years later, you can still go there. I think another thing interesting to talk about Caesar is that a lot of later leaders try to emulate him. Right?
Yeah.
Probably one of the most notorious is Mussolini. He saw himself as a Caesar, and he wanted to basically
Bring back
recreate
the glory of Rome.
Roman Empire. And there is a form of government, which is actually known as Caesarism, which is a form of government, recognized form of government, where there's usually a military leader, right? So you could say that Napoleon was one, right? You can say that Mussolini was one. And the term Tsar from Russia is actually Russian for Caesar.
Yeah, I did see that.
Kaiser too, it's German. So he actually becomes, his name, your name becomes like a title in other parts of the world. That's crazy. Imagine like people saying you're a Zablocki. Like, wow, yeah, the honor of.
Yeah, half my students don't even say that. I'm just Mr. Z.
Because you're so cool.
Do you think that's cool? When we were younger and I called like Mr. something, Mr. T or whatever, they were like, it's this. Or like, it's Mr. Smith. It's not Mr. S. Like now it thinks it's so different.
Yeah, I don't think mine even call me Mr. half the time.
Yeah, no, I usually get Zablocki or I get Z.
This last name or maybe if they need extra credit or help or something, then they'll.
That's when you know. Mr. Zablocki? I'm like, what do you want? This was a cool story that we kind of did not mention at all. But when the first time, when he's young and he gets married and then basically gets chased out and joins the military in 75 BC, gets kidnapped.
Yeah, this is awesome.
By pirates? Oh, yeah. So Caesar's ship is hijacked by pirates on the southwestern coast of Asia Minor. Yeah. And his captors named a ransom price for his release.
Yeah, he was like, no, it should be more than that. He was angry.
Exactly. Yeah, he was like offended. And mind you, he wasn't really like, he's only 25 yet. So this isn't the Caesar yet, but he's already known, like locally known in a sense, like he's doing okay military wise. But this is not Caesar, the leader. So anyway, they ask for a ransom and he gets upset because he's like, this is insulting. You need to ask for a greater sum. So they're like, oh, okay. So the pirates actually ask for a greater sum, and they do get the higher figure. It is raised by Caesar and his family, and he's freed. But he basically tells them, like, now thank you, and I will find you one day and kill you all for doing this.
He's more nice. I'm going to crucify you all.
Yeah, and he does.
And he does. So he goes back, he gets free, he raises up a fleet of his own, finds the pirates, and crucifies them all. But he does slit their throats first because he does feel bad about it.
Yes. Isn't that crazy? Again, we know a lot of this stuff because he wrote about it.
I don't know if that's something to brag about, but I guess in that time period,
I guess it's kind of badass.
I said I was going to crucify them, and I did, but I slit their throats because I'm a
good, kind being.
And they're like, "Oh man, that was a good move."
Anyway, if you guys go out there and look for stuff, there's literally websites that are just called "Fun Facts on Julius Caesar."
Oh, there's thousands.
Go have a blast. But until then. First of all, thank you to our listeners for suggesting this one. This was a fun one. And continue suggesting them. We'll take all your emails. You could always find us at www.historyteacherstalkingpodcast.com. We're there to answer any questions and respond to any emails. We always respond to our emails. That is true. So I guess that's it. And then we'll see you guys next week. So thank you so much for listening.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.